Hello everybody, this is Colonel. I'll be doing a presentation on some infographics called Speaking Truth to Create Change. So the first infographic here, we have one person on the left as an example, and another person on the right. I refer to them as causal agent 1, causal agent 2. Because we are causal agents, we have the ability to create causes that then produce. We have the ability to generate causes within us that then produce actions and results in the world that change the world around us. Person on the left is in a, quote, higher frequency of consciousness, that since they have the truth of 1 plus 1 equals 2, compared to a, quote, lower frequency of consciousness by the person on the right, who has 1 plus 1 equals 3, which is false. These are represented through the colors of the higher frequency of blue and the lower frequency of red, as well as the frequency, a visual of the frequency with a higher amplitude or magnitude. I forget which one, but it's when they're squished together. Yeah, amplitude would be height, magnitude. Anyways, it's a quicker frequency. The oscillations happen quicker. You can see that in a certain section, there's like 5 frequencies, and in the other one, there's only like 2 frequencies. So 2 oscillations, 2 hertz. The other one has 5 hertz. When you're in contact with the reality and truth in existence, then you're in contact with that one thing, and the more you're in contact with those aspects of truth in existence, one thing, another, then that increases your frequency of consciousness, because then you understand more about the world. And there's certain types of information that is a higher quality of information. So important truths, not just the truth that a tree is a tree or whatever, but there are certain truths, philosophical, psychological, and moral truths that are more important because they allow us to understand ourselves and how we act in reality to create the human world around us and our way of life. I've done a post before on the word abracadabra. That means I create as I say, or I create as has been spoken. You can say it in different ways, but I create as I say means that you're going to create as you say you're going to create, so you're going to be non-contradictory from what you say you're going to do and you're going to do, as well as creating with the power of the voice, that you're creating simply by saying things, that I create as I say. As you say things, it influences others and it affects their behavior. In my series on the power of consciousness, I go more into this and the power of the word as what is real magic and language and symbols to affect how we understand the world and then affect how we act in the world. And that's how politicians and others can influence us into believing things and then acting out based on those beliefs, just such as religions, etc. So we have a choice. Are we going to speak truth or are we going to speak falsity? And you have to know what you're talking about before you do that. You have to determine if it's true. So I've done posts and presentations, not on Steemit, about what truth is, what it means, and not all the ways that you go to understand it, but that it's demonstrable, it's repeatable, it's verifiable. And once you have done that, then you can explain it to others because you can demonstrate how something is a truth. So one person outputs, they output, speak, and project, and that can go out through their voice, it can go out through computer text or audio, even on a disc, and you can write a book, and all this conveys information where you're speaking. And whoever reads it and is influenced by it, it'll affect their life and it'll affect how they behave and how they act and create into the world. This is the power of our consciousness. This is the importance of truth. The importance of truth and understanding the supreme importance of truth in our lives. Because we need to speak truth to create the change, the positive change, the right change, not just change or actions or behavior that isn't in alignment with truth. At the bottom here, I didn't mention, the other part up top here. The receiver will then get the book or the disc or on their own computer. They'll have an input where they are listening and they receive that information. Then, at the bottom here, truth speech influences the falsity accepted. So from one frequency of truth being provided at the lower frequency that doesn't have that truth, then we affect people's frequency, and that creates the possibility of change, where then they become, instead of the lower and the red, well, the blue adds, and they go into that middle frequency of green in the color spectrum. The lower is red, and then you get to green and up towards the blues. It's the infrared and the ultraviolet, if you want to look into it. The next infographic just describes this more. So you have a cause, you from inside, internally in consciousness, that's a causal force that then creates an effect, cause and effect. You output, speak, and project, and that effect it reaches someone as an input where they listen and receive that information that you're conveying. This can also be even visual, body language, other things like this. It doesn't have to be verbal, but just speaking is what I'm talking about, the speaking of truth into existence. When there's interference in the, quote, frequencies, this creates tension and the possibility for change. When that input is listened and received to, it affects the person receiving it, whether it's truth spoken or falsity spoken, which I have another infographic for. But that affects us when someone speaks information to us. That's a causal stimulus to then stimulate us with information that we then process within us, and we can feedback. This is the feedback but in communication to understand what's going on. So we speak the frequency of truth. A frequency can be viewed as a vibration. Vibration can create friction. Speaking truth creates friction, tension, pressure, conflict in the interference with another frequency that's not aligned with that particular piece of information, that truth that can be demonstrated. The frequency of truth interferes with the frequency of falsity, right versus wrong, etc. Some people are more aligned with truth, and some people are more aligned with falsity. The only way for falsity to be corrected is for the force of truth to be spoken into creation. So as far as one person is concerned, that truth doesn't exist for them. It's not in existence. It's not in creation. So we have to create that truth into their perception of reality, because they're not currently perceiving it. And I've talked about objective reality out there in existence, and we have our own inner existence. We have our own inner reality, our own inner perception that is individual to each of us, because we're born at specific points in time and places. So we can't all have the same information at the same time. And that's why there's language and communication, so that we can share understanding and get all of our maps to match the territory in the objective existence. So that's the goal of speaking truth into creation. The truth is there, but we have to demonstrate it to people who don't see it. And some people might not want to see it, so then you just move on to the next person. Don't spend all your energy trying to convince someone of something that they don't want to see. So you can speak and demonstrate something for them to verify, but if they don't want to see what's there, and then they're not going to verify it, and they're not going to understand it. So that's just how some things happen, and you gotta not even waste your time trying to get that person to understand, get someone else to understand, and another person. The goal is to speak the truth into creation for more and more people to understand it, not to get not specifically just to get one particular person to understand it. You can't force someone to understand something. That's why it's a waste of energy. Maybe eventually they can understand it, but in that amount of energy and time you spent on that one person, well, you could have affected many other people. So that's why you don't waste your time, spend your time, choose your time wisely. Time is limited. So choose where you're going to direct your time and attention in life. And you don't have to give it to anybody. You can choose where to give your time and attention. And if you try to give it to someone and explain something, or you're trying to get information from them in order to further communication and they're just not having it, well then move on. Infographic number 3. So now it's the reverse, where someone who has less understanding, they're speaking, and that interferes, it's a tension of interference in frequencies again, but the other way. So they have a cause, which is a response to the first causal stimulus in the previous infographic. So the effect someone had, someone has cognitive dissonance or something, and they just want to reject the truth. They don't want to understand, or whatever. But the point is they received an input. That's a causal stimulus of information, knowledge, grammar coming in. It's processed. And then whether logic is used to a certain degree or not, then there's a response, an output that is generated from within. So there's the first causal stimulus that has an effect that creates another causal stimulus within after that's the processing part. And there's cognitive dissonance there and rejection. And then they create an effect which becomes a causal stimulus on the other person receiving it that affects them. So the other person that hears the falsity, the lies or deceptions spoken of as truth by someone can create tension as well. Truth does not unite with falsity. Those aligned with the truth are rejecting falsity with a shield, and can speak back truth that cuts through falsity to shatter it. I've done a post on shattering and destroying the falsity. That's how we're going to... You remove people's illusions, and what's left is not the illusion, which is the truth. So you go after... It's an apophatic process of removing the negative, removing the falsity. And then what you have left is more of the truth, rather than the same amount of falsity that was. Infographic number 4. This is just a more elaborate explanation of how it happens. The interference in frequencies creates tension and possibility for change. So the same thing, you create a cause, there's this causal stimulus to speak truth, and you speak it, that's the effect going out, the output that you project outwards. This speech has an influence and can affect people's frequency for them to change. Once they receive it, they're affected by it, and that that acts as a causal stimulus within them to generate change. So the affect leads to causal generation, which then can lead to an effect of a change in their frequency. An increase in understanding truth changes us. So that's where on the right I have, the red frequency, the shield around them. Well, now it's green, and it can go to blue, and if they accept the information, then they have that truth, the blueness of that particular aspect of truth, that one piece of information. It's because you verify it and you understand that, oh yes, that's how it is in reality. Speaking truth or falsity affects others in reality. Speak truth into creation to create an influence towards the polarity of truth. Awareness of the interference and disharmony with truth and morality is felt as cognitive dissonance and anger, guilt, tension, pressure, conflict, friction. That discomfort has a resolution through the care for truth to accept it, or through the apathy for truth to reject it. Do you let go of yourself and care for truth more? So what I mean by that last sentence is, do you let go of yourself? Or are you too attached to yourself to be able to objectively assess information and a demonstration, a replicability, and a verifiability of truth that someone's presenting that you can verify yourself. That demonstrates your care for truth. Do you care for truth more than you care for yourself, for maintaining that false self-view and the false worldview that you use to establish a valuation, and it's part of your ego personality identity construct and how you view yourself, your sense of self? So are you willing to let go of that self-view and that worldview to correct that worldview based on demonstrable information about what's going on, why something is wrong? Because again, it's about, yes, both demonstrate why something is true, the truth of what's false and the truth of what's true, the truth of what's a wrong way and the truth of what's a right way. And some people want to just stay fixed on the truth of what currently is now, and they don't want to identify what currently is now is wrong, and that there's a reason for it to change. So they need to understand that reason to change, or else they're not going to have any reason to change. That's why the importance of information and speaking truth into existence. Last infographic, number 5. No interference in false frequencies or behavior creates no contrast, no tension, and no discomfort, which requires no change. Chaos continues to develop. The negative grows as it manifests in reality through our actions. Failure to pay attention will result in no learning or correction of the error. Chaos teaches as a feedback of the failure of our actions. If we don't speak truth into creation, we don't affect people's understanding, and nothing really changes. So if there's a situation where you're two people on an island, yeah, you have no choice but either to get someone to understand or walk away. But if you're in a community, you can always speak to other people and speak the truth and have them verify the truth, and they can understand things, and then you can be on the same page with them, even though someone else doesn't want to be on the same page. And then the more people that are on the same page, the more people can work towards that common the more people can work within that common understanding and work towards more of a certain way of life through that understanding of what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false. So we need to, whenever there's chaos, whenever there's a wrong, it's going to create chaos. At first it might be small, but then it might get bigger and bigger. So this chaos continues to grow, the negative grows, because something is being done to create that negative. It's all based on our actions usually in the world. There's something being done, someone did something, an action was done, someone's job or whatever, and there's a negative, and then it keeps going and going. If it's not identified first, it just keeps going and going, and the chaos develops. And our failure to pay attention, from some people it's a fear of the negative, well then we're not going to learn or be able to correct the error because we're not facing the error. Chaos is important, the negative is important to recognize because it teaches us. It's a feedback of our failures. It's going to apply in our own lives. When things are going wrong in our own personal lives, where we can look and see what's going on, trace to the root causal source to figure out what is creating that effect. There's a problem, there's an issue, there's an effect that's manifested and generated that's not good. It's recognized as not good. So now we have to identify what's the problem. Is it simply that we just don't like it, or is it really not good? It's something wrong that's happening. And then we can identify where it's coming from, identify the root source. And then we can actually correct the error. So this is a feedback between actions that we do or others do that are part of the aggregate world we live in. All of our aggregate behavior collectively produces our way of life. We're not living as a quote, one man alone on an island. We're not alone. So all of our actions produce our way of life. And I have a previous presentation post, a bunch of work on that on Steemit. So the chaos is important to face and recognize. The negative is important to face and recognize, because we're creating it. There's someone creating it in our way of life. I'm saying we, collectively. It's there. And the only way it's going to go away is if we all face it. Or hope that magically the person will stop doing what they do, or the group of people will stop doing what they do, or someone will stop attacking someone and a country stop attacking another country. Like what's going on in our own worlds. This is why I'm alluding to this, is the war is going on, and with Syria is, we all have a responsibility because the governments are all doing this on our behalf and we're just letting them. And the only way we're going to be able to stop them, this is why some people don't understand this and advocate for the force, which can be viewed as an unjust use of force, as violence, because you need to get people, you need to get numbers to correct things. If you try to put down evil with a force, but the majority of people think they live in the illusion of good and order, and they think that they believe in the mask of evil, that the mask of good that evil uses to shield itself and appear good. Well, that evil won't be recognized by people. So when you attack the evil that they think is good, you attack the government, or you do something to stop the war, they're going to see you as the bad guy. So it's an information war at first. This is why the actions of force to put down violence and evil in the world sometimes are counterproductive. Like the physical force to hurt others or eliminate their lives, even though they're doing evil, and they're creating evil in the world, they're doing immoral things, it's wrong. Sometimes it can be done, but if too many people believe that the evil is good, what you're going to do is just have people defend the evil more because it's under attack. They think the good is under attack, and they're going to defend that. This is why it's counterproductive in some cases. I'm not saying all cases. But this is why it's an information war as well. Because you have to change the consciousness of people in order for them to understand what the actual problem is, so that they can recognize the evil, the negative, what's false, what's wrong. And once they identify it, then we can actually unite to stand against it. So all these wars and everything going on in the world, all the evil, information is required to empower people in order for them to change, and for all of us to act together to change the condition in our world. If it's just a few of us, we are seen as, quote, terrorists, or, quote, traitors or dissenters or whatever, because we're going against the status quo, that current condition that everyone just accepts. It's the illusion of good and order. Something wrong happens, but people think it's right. They just accept it as a default of what's right. In our society, in our community, wherever we are. It can be online, it can be in the real world, it's just, we accept things that are false, think that they're true. We accept things that are wrong and think they're right. We accept things that are, So I hope I'm making my point that we need to recognize what's wrong in order to empower us to have an accurate understanding of the problem, so that we can correct things properly by actually recognizing what the problems are. These effects, these issues and problems that are manifested, they come from a source, a cause, a root. Once we identify that, then we can change it. So information is the first part. And then when you get enough people, then you can start to use more. If you get a certain amount of people in the information war, there's a critical mass, 10%, 25%, and then it starts to snowball. The bandwagon effect, more people get into it because it becomes more popular. Once this happens, it'll probably just change everything. And you won't even need to use physical force because of that change in consciousness, that shift in consciousness. But it takes a lot of work to get people to learn. People don't want to learn. They don't really care for truth. So you have to... That's what a lot of my work is, to get people to care for truth so they can learn on their own. I can't spoon feed everything to everybody. So you got to want to learn on your own. That's why you got to have that care for truth. And that care for truth will get you to learn about the problem and get over the fear of the truth of what's false and be able to face that negative and that evil and that immorality and what's wrong in honesty and with the care and courage that the truth provides. And then we can actually get somewhere, because we're going to have the same understanding. And then we can act together to change it. But we will, in the likelihood, if you're talking about a community or society, once the information starts to be understood more and more people are talking about it, is the importance of speaking truth. The more people that talk about it, the more people get influenced by that frequency that's interfering, the tension, the conflict. Well, more people are doing this, and more people are going to have the opportunity to change. And the less people that speak about it, the less likely there is to change. So before we get to a 10 or 25%, and then more and more and more, to understand something going on, we have to speak it. And then eventually that happens, and then eventually it grows and grows and grows. And you don't even have to use physical force. All we have to do, at least to start off, and probably in the end, I'm not saying it's always going to be that way. Sometimes you do have to use physical force, but as we start with the voice, the force of our voice, speaking truth. In Egypt there was ma'a keru, and that's true of voice. Ma'a was true. Ma'at is truth. So ma'a keru was being true of voice, where you speak the truth, and that's the magic. That's the power to create. With our hands is the most direct power, our actions. But we have the power to create into reality just by speaking the truth, because we're creating that information into someone's input of information where they didn't have that information before. So we're creating something for them to understand, even though it was there to be understood, just like we could have understood it our own way. But if that information isn't present in their reality, in their input of information from their environment, that constitutes their reality. We don't know what's going on in another part of the world, even though we're all in the same reality. I'm talking about our inner reality of the information we have that's limited by our location in space and time. We don't know what's going on everywhere at the same time. So when we speak the truth, we're creating the truth into existence for someone else to be able to input into themselves, into their consciousness, and that will affect their frequency of consciousness and their behavior, and that's how we're going to change things in the world. So thank you very much for your time and attention. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.